Hello and welcome into the virtual 2020 Mackay Whitsunday Regional Integrated Science Forum, COVID style. Fortunately, we had to cancel our face-to-face forum and we've replaced it with the 4 Zoom sessions, the virtual sessions instead. My name's Ingrid. I'm the Paddock to Reef Coordinator for Reef Catchments, located in the Proserpine office. This event is facilitated by Reef Catchments through funding from the Queensland and Australian Government. So under the original scope of the Regional Integrated Science Forum, the objective was to deliver current and relevant information about the Paddock to Reef and Reef Water Quality Improvement Plan programs, whilst communicating the OGBR science and relevant reef report cards. So this is our 3rd presentation in a fortnightly session of 4. So if you keep an eye on that in your inbox for invitation with details of our remaining sessions, we'll have one more session in a fortnight's time. I'm going to hand you over now to Kim Kleidon. She's our veteran host for today's session. She's going to be the facilitator for all our sessions.
Hello everybody, and it's great to have you joining us virtually. Firstly, we'd like to share a message from the Regional Traditional Owner Reference Group.
My name's Samala Deshong. I'm a Coonabarra woman. My country is situated from Cape Palmerston to St Lawrence in the Mackay Whitsunday Isaac region. I've been an active member for the Reef Catchments Traditional Owner Reference Group since it was started in 2006. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we stand on in Mackay, the Yuwiburra people. We'd like to pay our respects to our elders, past and present. The 7 tribal groups in the region are Yuwiburra, Coonabarra, Burradabana, Widi, Gia, Naro and Juru. A lot of us are on the coast. We are saltwater people. The Great Barrier Reef is important to the region's traditional owners. It's a food source. We've got the islands. We have stories way back that are brought down to us. A ceremony, a performed men's business. So there's a lot of reasons why, we look after the reef. A lot of the catchments are nurseries, the seagrass beds are nurseries for, some of the fish, shrimp and that come from the reef. It's important to look after land and sea country. We've been brought up to look after country. That's why it's very significant to the traditional owners looking after land and water. We need water to regenerate. If it didn't, Mother Earth would die. So it's important for us to share our knowledge and work with Western science to help look after country for future generations.
Thank you there to Samala Deshong. Today's 1-hour session features Dave Clancy, who'll provide a comprehensive overview of 2 projects monitoring pesticide loads in the Mackay catchment, one under federal funding and water quality targets, the other evaluating application rates and trials under the state funding. He'll be followed by our second presenter, Molly O'Day, working with growers in the Myrtle Creek subcatchment to set up and monitor water quality focused demonstration sites which compare different farming practices. Dave Clancy is a graduate extension agronomist with pharmacists in the Mackay region. He holds a diploma in agriculture, in environmental science, I should say, and is an agriculture extension trainee. Dave's experience in water sampling and analysis, irrigation research and trials and farm work seems incongruous with his youthful looks. Interested in chemical management, precision agronomy and geospatial data collection and management, his presentation will detail some of the challenges encountered through Project Bluewater and meeting national water quality targets, along with an overview of the trial designs and application methods applied in the Sandy Creek project. Welcome, Dave Clancy.
Thanks, Kim. So, as Kim said, I've been working with Project Bluewater and Sandy Creek over the last year or so, so I'll give a bit of an overview of what we've been doing there. So I'll give a bit of a background to how the projects came about, and then talk about what we've been doing on the ground, and then what we've actually found. So the 2017 scientific consensus statement stated that the current initiatives are not going to meet the water quality targets. Pesticide loads had not reduced, and exceedances were still being reported in local catchments, and those exceedances were a high risk to aquatic ecosystems. And so projects that addressed pesticide issues in the waterways were important to put in place. So here we have a graph of imidacloprid concentrations over time. This one's pretty common, a fair few people have seen it, but the main thing I want to point out is just the increase of exceedances that we're seeing over time, and why it's important to have pesticide projects put in place. So that's how Project Bluewater came about, and it sort of looks at extension from the ground up. So it's a pilot project funded by the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, goes for 2 years and ends in March 2021. The project's been rolled out in the Central region as well as the Burdekin region, with 35 growers in each region. And additional to the growers, we've engaged with spray contractors as well as resellers. And we think it's important to include more people than just the growers because, for example, resellers give out a lot of advice and a lot of recommendations, and it's very important to engage them. So the objectives of the project are to build the understanding, knowledge and skills of the growers, the resellers and the contractors, and hopefully to help them shift from using high-risk products to lower-risk products. We develop customised pesticide management plans and tailor those to each grower's specific farm. And we're also aiming to reduce the amount of active ingredient applied by 6 million grams over the 12,000 hectares under cane in the project. So how are we doing that? Here are some of the activities we're doing on the ground. So we've got, we go out and visit growers on farm and do sprayer and imidacloprid applicator assessments. There's funding in the project to put towards upgrading growers' spray rigs. We work with them to develop the pesticide management plans. We also collect baseline data, so that's P2R. We have an attitudinal survey, and also we collect their spray records so that we can create a bit of a baseline and benchmark each grower against the regional average for pesticide usage. We've also got specialists in from New South Wales to help conduct sprayer assessments on contracted spray rigs, and we've also had them run specialist training workshops. So, and that's for growers, and that was in January this year, and we've got them coming again later on this year. We also have a range of different demonstration trials put in place throughout Mackay and the Burdekin. And that photo on the right there is just in January this year, the Advanced Chemical Spray Application Workshop. And growers said they really enjoyed it, they got a lot out of it, and I think these kind of things, helping growers use their spray rigs optimally, are very valuable. So Sandy Creek project, and specifically in the Brightly subcatchment, is quite similar in what we've been doing in terms of on-the-ground operations. However, there are a few different things there. So it's funded by the Queensland government, and the purpose behind the Brightly project was to see if practice change could be measured. Now, Brightly is quite a defined catchment because of its topographical features. As you can see, I've drawn a bit of a yellow line roughly around where the catchment boundaries are. And most of the catchment's either bush or it's under cane. So the idea behind it is if we can implement some positive practice change in the catchment in terms of pesticide usage, will we be able to measure differences in the water quality results? So we're currently in the process of implementing those practice changes. So it'll be interesting to see what the results come up, or how they come up in the time to come. And we, in terms of going and visiting farm growers, we had similar findings in Sandy Creek and Bluewater. So what did we find? 97% of the spray rigs that we assessed required some improvement of some kind. And that could be something really small, like a new set of nozzles, or it could be something quite large. The boom was ready to be retired and upgraded. But what we did find is there were some issues around the nozzles growers were using. Often they'd have just one single nozzle they tried to do the whole spray job with, or they'd have just the completely wrong nozzles. So nozzles are critical to getting an effective spray job because they have a large impact on the water rate and the droplet size. And those two things will impact spray efficacy quite severely. We also found that sometimes growers had brand new nozzles in there and they were putting out 15% more product or more volume than they said they should be, which was surprising. And we put that one down to a manufacturing fault, but it just goes to show that everything needs to be calibrated and checked. And just because it's brand new doesn't mean it's going to be working optimally. And again, with the nozzles, some products have legislative requirements such as 2,4-D, which requires a minimum of a very coarse droplet size. And we found that some growers were not using the correct nozzles for 2,4-D. A bit of action in the background there. Some more project findings were the nozzle spacing. So sometimes the spacings of the nozzles weren't set up correctly, and that didn't allow the boom to maintain uniform distribution across its width. So 74% or 3/4 of the booms that we assessed were not set up to provide consistent coverage across the spray swath. So some sections under that boom would receive more chemical than others and doesn't give a completely even spray job. We also found spray overlap and spray underlap. So when a grower would drive down his rows with his boom and then turn around and come back, between those two passes there'd either be overlap or underlap. And overlap, of course, you're going to have excessive product applied, and that can impact the crop itself, and it can also lead to increased off-site movement of that chemical and increased runoff. Now that overlap, the worst we found was 70 centimetres, but often there was overlap of about 3% of the boom width. Now that might not sound like much, but if an average farm is 200 hectares, 200 hectares, and you've got overlap of 3% or 2.5%, let's say, then 2.5% of 200 hectares is 5 hectares. That's getting sprayed that doesn't need to be sprayed. Now, on average, a grower might apply 3 kilos of active ingredient per hectare per year. So over 5 hectares, that's going to be 15 kilos of active ingredient of pesticide that's being applied that doesn't need to. So fixing up something as simple as a little bit of overlap in a boom can be a really effective way of reducing excessive application of products. And underlap, so underlap can cause poor spray coverage. The area in the underlap zone might not receive as much chemical as it should, and it'll have reduced weed control through sublethal doses of chemicals. And if you've got those weeds surviving that are more resistant, then that can add to pesticide resistance. So that's something we want to avoid. Now this photo on the right here, we can see in the red circle, the cane there is showing phytotoxic effects, and that's because of some overlap where there was double rates of chemical applied. And the main reason we found for why overlap or underlap was occurring was growers changing their cane row spacing. So traditionally they might have been at 1.6 metre cane rows and they've gone up to 1.7 or 1.8, 1.85, and they've left their boom how it is. So with a few simple adjustments, shifting the nozzle distances apart, it's quite an easy problem to address. Okay, so most booms we looked at had 3 or 5 sections, 1 or 2 on the left, 1 in the middle, and another 1 or 2 on the right. And we found there was some inconsistencies in output and pressure between those different sections. Some of the causes for that were clogged filters, as well as plumbing issues. So some of those outer sections might have had thin hose, let's say 1/2 inch hose going to them, when they could have upped the hose size to 3/4 inch. Then there's less friction in the system and the pressure should be even across the boom. We also found that sometimes the pressure gauge in the cab that the grower was looking at, that pressure gauge was showing a different pressure to what we measured at the actual nozzle itself. So in the photo on the right, we've got a pressure gauge on the nozzle there. And say if a grower sees 3 bar in the cab and it's only coming out at 2 bar at the nozzle, then there's going to be a big difference in water rate and droplet size. So making sure the grower is aware there's a difference, or fixing it so it looks, so that does show what it actually is reading, is important to do spray jobs correctly. And one of the reasons for that is if usually if the grower is doing something, does a sprayer job, and it doesn't really do the job properly, then one of the first things they're going to do is up the rate. So they're trying to mask the problem, but they're not really treating the original cause itself, if that makes sense. And again, the things like clogged filters and uneven outputs occurring, and us finding them when we go to visit the growers on farm, shows that there's a lack of calibrations being done. So that's probably an area we could improve in as well. There we go. All right, so here is an example of one of the boom upgrades we've done. So we can see on the left here, there's a grower there with some trailing legs on an old tractor, and he's used this to spray most of his farm with, and it had some interesting results. And in the left photo still, you can see his cab tractor on the right. Now through the project, we've had some funding to help him upgrade his boom, and he's got a completely new boom there on the right now, and he's going to get much more effective spray jobs through using that. Automatic rate controllers. So we found that some growers had automatic rate controllers, and they're quite useful as they adjust the output changing with the speed of the tractor. Yeah, change the output in relation to the speed of the tractor. So for anyone who didn't have an automatic rate controller, often they'll be spraying down their rows, they get close to the end and slow down, and that product's still coming out at full rate, and then they'll turn it off, turn around, line back up, turn the sprayer back on, wait for a second for the nozzles to come up to pressure, and then take off. So there's excessive product being applied at the ends from either slowing down to stop or speeding up to start. So using an automatic rate controller can help to prevent that over application. Looking at imidacloprid applicators, a lot of work's been done looking by other organisations, looking at imidacloprid applicators and using it properly. But one thing we've done here is we've given growers flow view meters, which are these little clear things with silver balls inside. And because imidacloprid is applied under the surface, it's hard, you're not sure if the product's coming out or not. So quite often a grower might, before he puts it in the ground, he might turn it on, look back, make sure that the imidacloprid's dribbling out of the nozzles, and then he'll put it in the ground and go through his, and apply it to his cane. So instead of doing that, if you have a flow view meter, as long as there's flow going through it, those little silver balls will stay suspended. And as soon as there's a blockage and the flow stops, that silver ball will drop to the bottom. So it's a really effective way of making sure that imidacloprid is being applied, and it doesn't have to be applied to the surface where it's a lot more subject to run off into the waterways. From the spray records that we gathered from the growers, it showed that the top 5 used chemicals in Mackay and Burdekin regions were 2,4-D, followed by atrazine, then paraquat, glyphosate, and diuron. Spray water quality. So water is the cheapest input into a spray tank mix, and it can have a really large effect on the efficacy of the spray job. We did some water tests with the growers, and we showed up there was a fair bit of hard water, and some of the water had quite high levels of bicarbonates as well. So if you put in something like Roundup or glyphosate into a tank, then usually the Roundup will react with the chemistry. So the spray water will react with the glyphosate, and you'll start losing active chemistry that can react with the plant and kill the plant. So addressing water issues is important to get the most effective spray jobs. pesticide decision support tool. So in our pesticide management plans, we've included this pesticide decision support tool, which is quite new. It's been developed by water quality scientists from the government and Queensland University researchers. And basically it looks at all different chemicals used in cane and gives them an aquatic risk rating. So now you can make decisions on products to use, taking into account their aquatic risk. And the main factors of consideration there are the mobility of the product and the toxicity of the product. And then we've got our pesticide management plans. So we tailor plans to each grower and we put a bunch of maps in there. So we've got soil maps, slope maps. So some products have restrictions in regard to soil types and slope. We also have weed maps, insect pressure maps, drainage maps, sensitive areas maps, and watercourse buffer maps. We also include some chemical option tables for growers with those environmental risk ratings taken from the pesticide decision support tool. We include a nozzle chart for the specific nozzles that the growers are using, and we also put a bit of a summary in for the chemicals they've been using and try to benchmark them against the regional average. All right, almost there. Some of the other things we've been doing in the project is a bunch of shed meetings. We've run a few field walks showing growers some of our trials. We've run some workshops with resellers, some social media posts, and we've also had those advanced chemical spray application workshops. Here's some of the demonstration trials. So we've got some alternative herbicide treatment trials, looking at different residual herbicides and their spray and their weed control efficacy, as well as what's running off out of their paddock. So collecting runoff out of that paddock is great for the growers because they actually get to see what's coming out of their paddock and yeah, looking at the results. And I guess it feels more real and they get involved and like it. We've also got some directed spray nozzles in plant cane trials, air inducted nozzles for Irvine legs with guards and recycle pits. So that's a bit of a broad overview of what we've been doing. I'd love to go into it in more detail, but hopefully that gets you up to speed and you found it interesting. Thank you.
David Clancy, thank you very much for your time today and for all of the fabulous information you've presented. Moving on to our second presenter today, seeing as we are now clocking up our second half hour of this virtual event, I would like to introduce you to a lovely young lady, Molly O'Day. She's one of the SRA adoption team responsible for delivery of the industry-led adoption strategy for Australian cane growers and millers. She works closely with SRA research staff, growers, millers and other service providers to help the industry improve productivity, profitability and sustainability. Based in Proserpine, working on the pathways to water quality improvement in the Myrtle Creek subcatchment project. Her passion for agriculture comes from experience on the family broadacre cropping and merino sheep farm in South Australia. In the 2019-2020 wet season, grab samples were taken from Myrtle Creek and tested for nutrients and pesticides. And today, Molly's going to present a summary of the water quality results from the samples and demonstration sites. Welcome, Molly O'Day.
Rightio. So, yes, Kim's just given a great introduction. I am Molly and I'm working on the pathways to water quality improvement in the Myrtle Creek subcatchment project, which is a bit of a mouthful. So I'm going to really quickly run through what this project is, a bit of our trials and some of the work that we're doing. So we'll get straight into it. Rightio. So we're monitoring paddock scale runoff water quality on 4 different farms in the subcatchment. And the most important thing here to note is that these are demonstration sites, not statistically analysed research trials. So we were unable to catch all samples across the entire events in every runoff event. So just important to know these are estimates. And the important thing here really is communicating with the farmer. So a lot of our results from last year and this year support previous research like timing application to avoid runoff for at least the first 20 days after application, incorporating herbicides and fertilizers with irrigation. Of course, the more you put on, the more comes off in the runoff, and accurate applications such as applying things like Suscon properly, which we'll get into in a minute. So the project started in 2018. We had 4 sites last year, and you can find information about those, the fact sheets, on the SRA website. 4 sites were dropping nitrogen rates in old ratoons, accounting for nitrogen in meal mud, one with a nitrification inhibitor, and a herbicide one with Bobcat IMAX versus Flame and Atrodex. So our first site this last wet season looked at ENTEC, which is a nitrogen stabiliser. ENTEC helps to protect against unpredictable weather and is often used based on the farmer's weather prediction of the coming season. So due to limited waterlogging or denitrifying situations at this site this season, expected that there wouldn't be such a difference in nitrogen loss as possible. We also good to note here that the ENTEC side was applied with stall zippers and the non-ENTEC side applied without stall zippers, and you can see there the difference in slot closure. Also important to note, at this site we had a little bit of difficulty, a big difference in the runoff volume between the 2 treatments, even though they were right next to each other. So that could skew the results a little bit. Here we're looking at the DIN, dissolved inorganic nitrogen concentration, and the lines we've got on the graph here, the red one is from 2014, a sort of event current conditions, a bit of a baseline from the Mackay-Whitsunday water quality plan for the Myrtle Creek. So remembering these are for in the freshwater in the creek, not the Paddock scale stuff we are looking at. And not too much difference there. The scale is pretty small, but pretty well below those lines. So that's positive to me. And phosphorus, filterable reactive phosphorus on the right. Interestingly here, no phosphorus was applied this year, but we've got some high levels just from historic meal mud application, but not too far above those values. So I think it's pretty positive. So next site, we had a herbicide site. We were looking at Valor, which is the active ingredient is flumioxazin, versus the farmer's usual practice of tordin and atrazine. Imidacloprid also applied at this site, same on both sides. It's been applied 4 years in a row now. Once again, no phosphorus applied at this site due to historic meal mud application. So talking, Dave talked about the pesticide decision support tool. So on using that data, flumioxazin is a higher risk than imidacloprid, then atrazine, then 2,4-D. So this suggests that if applying in a high risk period, the tordin atrazine mix may actually be of lower environmental risk than the Valor. However, we had quite a long time from application to the first rainfall event, 30 days for tordin and atrazine and 68 days for the Valor. This suggests that both of these strategies are probably of lower environmental risk given that timing to runoff. It's also important to remember that these are paddock scale concentrations, not in creek concentrations. How do we go next? Here we go. So this site, DIN looking pretty good there. Event 3 that had the highest nitrogen reading, that was the first rainfall event at this site. 1 and 2 were irrigation generated runoff events, and the phosphorus also not looking too bad there either. So here to the Valor, we had a little bit lost, just a small detection on that second event. Where I've got LOR, that's just saying the at the laboratory they couldn't detect, it was lower than detectable, and only 0.3% of the applied was lost. So that sounds pretty good to me. Same here with the atrazine, pretty low losses, 0.1% there on treatment 2 where atrazine was applied. Tiny bit being lost on the other side as well, which is likely from historical application. 2,4-D, pretty similar story there, 0.3% lost on treatment 2 and a tiny bit still detected on treatment 1, but we also had some spot spraying of 2,4-D across the whole paddock, which would explain that. Imidacloprid, we've got those freshwater guideline values that Dave was talking about, that 95% threshold. It's a bit above that, only lost 0.2% of applied, and also applied 4 years in a row. So we think this site looks pretty good compared to some other research. Site 3, we had blanket versus band spraying. So the band spraying, just 50% of the paddock was sprayed just on top of the cane row. We used Bobcat IMAX, which is imazapyc and hexazinone. There was also stool zipper treatment overlaid on top of this site, with stool zippers being used on the band spray side and not on the blanket spray side. The results from this one followed what we expected pretty well. For the herbicides, with the nitrogen phosphorus, all at this site are pretty much below what it should be once it gets into the creek. So they're looking good, not too much difference between treatments. And here we go, where we put twice the amount of herbicide on, approximately half was lost. So you can see here, treatment 1, twice as much applied, about 8.5% lost. Other side, 4.4% lost. That's for imazapyc. Same story with the hexazinone, roughly half. He also put a bit of 2,4-D and MCPA on, just normal blanket spray, losing 2% and 3.5% there, and they're basically below what it should be once it gets to the creek, so that is pretty good. And our last site, which was interesting, was our imidacloprid site. We had Confidor, so liquid, versus the Suscon granular imidacloprid. It was a plant cane site, and there was significantly more water runoff at this site, which possibly could cause some higher numbers than the other sites. Nitrogen, a lot higher values than the other sites, and we're putting this down to likely, because it's plant cane, it's been worked a lot more than the other sites, and we're possibly getting quite a lot of mineralization of nitrogen. However, phosphorus is really, really low amounts of phosphorus at this site. Onto the imidacloprid. Here's the interesting stuff. The orange bars, treatment 1, is the Confidor, and the green bars are the Suscon. Not much difference. However, there is a big difference in the amount of product lost as you're applying more active ingredient with the Suscon than the Confidor. High losses here, but there was a lot of water backing up. Imidacloprid is really soluble, we think, so it's quite easily come out of the soil here, and also some trouble with the application of Confidor. We had to apply it by hand, and we think it was not quite applied deep enough and was possibly mixed through the hill at hilling up, so a lot more susceptible to loss. Atrazine was put on this site, about 19% lost, pretty high numbers there. But we think this possibly, it's just an estimate here, as we had a lot of water lost and we couldn't catch the water from the entire event and had to estimate a bit here. And also was some pendimethalin and metolachlor applied at this site. We expect they've got a lot lower losses, and pendimethalin, go back one. Pendimethalin has a lot lower runoff losses compared to other herbicides due to its ability to bind to soil particles. It's got a lot lower solubility, and the metolachlor was applied a lot earlier than the atrazine and imidacloprid, so allowing more time for incorporation and breakdown. This suggests that timing is a major influence on losses. That's a summary of those sites really quickly. Key messages: less on, less off is a pretty obvious one. That application depth of the Suscon and the timing really shone through. So I also grabbed some samples out of the creek itself. So here we can directly compare to those 95% aquatic thresholds. once a week between December and March, 3 sites. Not much action at the top above the cane field, so I'll show you pesticides just for the middle and the end site. So you can pretty much see the trend here for yourself. The red line is that freshwater guideline value, the 95% level. Week 5 is where the rainfall started at the end of December. You can see possibly we've got not as big a spike with diuron here when the rain starts. That might be due to people moving away from diuron when it has a cutoff. You can't apply after a certain date. People might actually be sticking to that legislation, but lots of exceedances. Imidacloprid, same thing here, lots of exceedances, which is expected. And onto the DIN, so the nitrogen, also got some exceedances above. This is the Mackay-Whitsunday water quality plans for the Myrtle Creek. So we've still got some exceedances on what their targets, what they're aiming for. Over here on the top side, we've got some higher concentrations of DIN. These are just on the days where there was flow from the top site. I couldn't take samples there every week. But as there was such low flow, you would expect the actual load of nitrogen still to be lower than those mid and end sites where there was a lower concentration. And phosphorus looking pretty good underneath the values for the top site. So 4 sites again, 4 new ones this coming season, and we're hoping to do some additional creek sampling. So that's all I've got for you. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask, and feel free to pick up the phone, send me an email if you're after any more information. I can go through it in more detail with you. Thanks.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both of our presenters once again, Dave Clancy and Molly O'Day, and congratulate them on their first virtual event. I think it's probably a little less scary than being on stage in front of 100 people. The Mackay-Whitsunday Regional Integrated Science Forum has been fabulous over these last 3, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to reveal some more information about how the video content or the recorded asset will be utilised, but I'm sure we'll be in touch with you to let you know if you'd like to review any of the things you may have missed. Any further questions, as mentioned, should be directed to the speakers via RCL staff who've organised this. Publishing of any information, I just need to do this for people who weren't in the room at the beginning, disclosed during this event will require the permission of either RCL or individual government media approvals, particularly with people who are working with government departments. And of course, for Molly today, SRA, and perhaps David under pharmacist communications. So please make sure that if you have managed to catch any of this in recorded screen format, it cannot be published without the specific authority of the people organising the event. We have some takeaway points just to cover off on before we finalise today. With Dave, if you missed his presentation, he did show us the increasing pesticide exceedances under the pilot project of Project Bluewater that have been reported through monitoring Central and Burdekin region. There were project objectives, including building understanding, knowledge and skills, developing customised pesticide management plans, reviewing product risks and other options, plus the on-ground activities, which included a collection of baseline data, sprayer and imidacloprid applicator assessments, sprayer upgrades, training and demonstration trials, also the supply, which I found great, of the flow view meters to assist growers in their endeavours. Findings: 97% of rigs require improvement. Also uncovered the importance of nozzle selection / setup, spray overlap, which has been recorded at up to 70% or even underlap, which impacts crop, and increased runoff. So the contributing factors due to maintenance of rigs has also been found to be a factor, and other issues include record keeping and weather recording. The pesticide decision support tool to assist with aquatic risk is to be published in the coming months, so please keep your eye out for more information on that. There was some interest shown. For Molly, her project began monitoring in 2018 with initial results available online on the SRA website. Note, these are demonstration sites, not statistically analysed research trials, and they've been unable to catch samples across entire events in every case. And so they were presenting estimates. Molly presented a little bit about ENTEC, which is an end stabiliser, and the site information related to the 2019-2020 trial. There's also results that support previous research and demonstration results linking practices such as timing application to avoid runoff for at least the first 20 days, incorporation of herbicides and nutrients with irrigation can assist in improving water quality. Less on, of course, was her big takeaway, less off. Applying products like Suscon properly is another thing that growers need to take into account. We also heard about the dissolved inorganic nitrogen, or DIN, concentration levels are generally under the Mackay Whitsunday water quality plans, the DIN water quality plan anyway, an event current conditions and 2021 event target for the Myrtle Creek. We talked about imazepyc, MCPA, imidacloprid, amongst several other chemical applications, comparisons, and they were all highlighted in her presentation that we whizzed through. And of course, finally, she finished off with the grab samples, which revealed, similarly to David Clancy's presentation, that there are many exceedances under the current regional water quality targets. And that basically concludes what we've had to present today. If you'd like further information about how you can see this again or be involved in the next virtual integrated science forum, then please stay in touch with Reef Catchments Limited. Ingrid, thank you very much for having me again today.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, so I just wanted to wrap it up and thank everyone for being involved in today's session. Particularly want to thank the presenters, because without our presenters, these sessions would never happen. So thanks, Molly and Dave, for your very informative sessions today and presentations. Thanks to our facilitator, Kim. She's doing a wonderful job, fabulous job, keeping ahead of the topic content and keeping us engaged and giving us that real farm aspect with the rooster in the background. I really enjoy him on the occasion. And thank you for Samala from Talk for our acknowledgement of country video that we got to film before these sessions. So that was really great insight to the Talk group in our region. And mostly the working group for putting this together and helping facilitate this. Without our working group, we wouldn't have this to put together. So if you've got any feedbacks, please do reach out. My email and phone numbers on the screen there. And we do have another session in 2 weeks' time, so I look forward to seeing you all back for the next session. So once again, thank you.